Peter Kilchmann opened his first gallery over 30 years ago in 1992. Meanwhile, he operates 3 spaces, 2 in Zurich and 1 in Paris. And he represents a diverse range of contemporary artists, mainly from Europe, Latin America and the USA. So how does Peter Kilchmann choose his artists, and why did he see a potential in a space in Paris? Welcome to Swiss Art Biz. I'm Tanja König, I'm your host, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Peter Kilchmann here in the studio. Hi, Peter.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much for the invitation. Yes.
Thank you very much for coming. Now, tell me, what is your very first connection that you have with art? Your earliest memory?
My earliest memory, this is from childhood, of course. When I was basically always interested in art. But I was not coming from a big art knowledge family. But we always went once in a while to a museum, and so this was my first memory. I grew up in a small place, in the canton of Lucerne. The place is called Reiden. And in the 70s, once I remember that the municipality received a gift of a collector. And they didn't really know what to do with it. They were a little bit over surprised, and then finally they showed it in the basement of the schoolhouse, and it was open once a week, and we could visit it. It's nothing really important. It's more local artists, but there was art there, and then I love to go there.
Okay, so that was like a key moment for you to kind of go into art, or was it just like a first passion?
It was a first passion. A passion, and then it was growing. Yes, correct.
Then in your CV, I saw that you did business school. Was that an apprenticeship?
It was a business school. It was the Handelsschule, exactly.
In 1981 to 1984. And after that business school, you actually went into art. You enrolled at ICART, Institut de Carrière Artistique in Paris, followed by one-year study of art history at Hunter College in New York. So what made you then interested in art after that business school?
The business school was more or less also kind of the wish of my parents, that I would do something useful, but in their sense, and not really going for art, but going more rather for business, for something that would bring some money later. That's what they told me. So then I did this school, but then I was not really ready to continue this way. And then I found out about this great school at the time in Paris, this ICART, this Galerie Artistique, which was it's still around, this school in Paris, and it is mostly for a lot of French journalists, or also curators and people in the art world are doing this school. And it is really, I think it's great. It prepares yourself to work in the art business, but not as an artist, and not as not as an artist basically, but what is around, and there's so much around. So I learned a lot there. We did also, let's say, I was also painting there, but the idea was not to become a painter, but the idea was really to know what is it paint. What is a canvas? We had a dark room. We made photographs. We were sent out to the city of Paris on a reportage, and then we came back, and then we also made our small reportage. We had a small TV studio, but just for us, in order to talk briefly, in order to prepare ourselves. So it was really preparing for working within an art scene. So I enjoyed that very much. And I remember also at the time when I was there, Paris had for many years, it had these special years. When I was there was l'année de l'Inde, the year of India. And it was a very big event in Paris at the time, with a lot of exhibitions. Everything was about India. And then we were also working on this subject. This was also kind of our important thing then. Mm-hmm. So, but then after 1 year, this was over. And then I moved on, and I went to New York, correct.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But what sparked you then, what made you decide to go to this school in Paris? How does that happen? How old were you at the time, and you just thought, I want to go into the arts? And did you know that you wanted to become an art dealer, or was it not so fleshed out yet?
I mean, it was not really fleshed out, but I rather knew what I didn't want it to become. And I rather knew that I didn't want it to become an artist. But it was more that I had the feeling that I was not good enough to be an artist, that I was not creative enough, that I was. So then the first step, the first move was actually going into writing, so into journalism. This I was interested, and then eventually I moved on. I moved on when I then went to New York. I was also an intern in a gallery at the time in Soho, and whereas I also learned a lot, I must say.
So if you thought that you had more talent, you would want to become an artist.
I mean, the first idea was to become an artist, but I never had an education as an artist. And then I moved on from, yes, an art field, which is then either curating or writing. And then the last, what was a kind of over somehow or left, is to become a dealer.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, that's how somehow how it went on, yes.
Okay, so it kind of just happened. So your first professional experience, you actually said you had an internship in New York at the gallery. Then you had a job at Museum für Gestaltung in Zurich in the poster department, then at an auction house in the department of photography. So you already got in touch with different mediums and specializations. So how did that impact you and your business afterwards, your gallery then?
I mean, all these courses, being in the Museum of Applied Arts and in this auction house, you have to see at the time it was also about what could I do, what could I find. And I mean, my point was also that when I was in New York, I was about to stay there longer, but I did not get the green card. So I had really to go back. I came then back to Switzerland, and then I decided to move to Zurich because I mean I think this was the only city where I could imagine to live.
Yeah.
And then I started really in Zurich. I really moved to Zurich with one suitcase. I think it was January 1st, 1990, when I was. I didn't really know the city so very well, and I had first a furnished apartment in Hardturmstrasse, so that was really my step. I really started out like this, and then I got this job which was close at the Museum of Applied Arts, which was interesting. They have a fantastic collection of posters. I mean, amazing. From all different types and all different years, and it was very interesting. You have to see, it was the very beginning of digital times. So before of that, all the posters were thousands and thousands were just lying somewhere, and this was the very 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 first step. And I was there to try to digitalize them or to photograph them. And since at the time it was still very expensive, though, then only the most important posters would be photographed and documented. So that this was actually my job, what I was doing. And then after that, I was working in an auction house, in Schneider Auctions. It was a young auction house at the time in Hunk. It was also a great place. I mean, I learned a lot. It was Daniel, my boss, was the first one having an auction house only concentrated on modern and contemporary art and photography, and which then sadly he ran out of business during the Gulf War in the 90s. And then I was again on the street. And I thought, no, this is maybe the moment I could hope and I could try to do something myself. In the beginning of the 90s, there was also an interesting moment in Zurich. In the city, it was kind of like a new wave for art. It was a moment when, for instance, the Kunsthalle was founded. At the time, it was in the Mühle Tiefenbrunnen, and then it was also when a new generation of galleries came up and started to work in Zurich. So really the new generation, which is now the established generation, but this is really interesting. I mean, Ivan Wirth opened the cup a little bit later after me, just next block, and there was also Eva Briesenhuber coming from Vienna too and living in Zurich and opening up a gallery. So it was a very exciting moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, I mean, it seems like you did not really want to leave New York. You had to, but then you just came to Zurich at the right time.
Yes, probably it was a bit before the right time, but we were kind of then kind of
The first
modeling
ones.
the right
Yeah.
the moment, you know. Then I opened up the gallery in '92. It was in Hardturmstrasse. It was also out there where was there was used to be the Steinfels, this old factory, and they had a lot of empty space. It was a good moment. There was also then the second spot for Kunsthalle as well, and for several galleries, and they were kind of at also dance schools, and there was a lot going on there. And I'm talking about 92 to maybe 96, and then this was over because there was a new construction of buildings then. And but by then we had the great moment to be also close, of course, with the curators, which was Mendes Bürg in the Kunsthalle, and then Ryan Wolfs, of course, also in the Migros Museum, the new founded, then after to be founded Migros Museum. And then we learned about the Löwenbräu complex, that the Löwenbräu complex was empty. This Rhino had a lot of energy and who was working for the Migros Kulturprozent. And at the time, you have to know, the Migros didn't have a museum for contemporary modern art. They were just displaying their artworks, what they bought in their in their places where they work, where they mostly offices. So he was the person behind moving on to create this museum, and then he got this Löwenbräu, and then there was a lot of space. So he was generous enough also to invite or to ask galleries if they would want to participate in this building, which then at the end of the day was almost the first building, if you worldwide, whereas commercial and institutional spaces were functioning together.
That's incredible. It's very interesting. And you said you basically shaped. You were part of that movement of these people that were shaping this art scene in Zurich. And you came with a suitcase with nothing. Okay, you found a job, but then you lost a job at the auction house. So how do you go from losing your job at the auction house to opening your own gallery? Like how do you get started?
Well, I mean, it's the practical side was like this, that I got this space also, and as I said, Hardturmstrasse, which was an old misused office spaces. So you have to understand, you got in, it was on second floor, and you got in, and you had these stalls one after another where where the offices were, and I could rent everything. And the first 2 years, I must say, I unofficially also lived there. I mean,
Okay.
one of the offices was exhibition spaces, and the other one was then in the evening turned out was then my my private part. And also the first 2 years, I was still also working part time from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I think the gallery opened from Thursday to Saturday. And this, I think, really helped me to grow up a little bit, because I mean, you have to understand that the first moment it was very difficult to sell. You know, you had to work a lot to make people know that there is a young gallery there. And so then I think it was a very good moment like this. It was not so stressful.
But then it was not a commercial idea in the very begin. Like, what motivated you? Like, it wasn't the big money in the beginning.
Of course, it was a commercial gallery, but I mean, but realities are you have to start out, you know, and then it was very difficult at the beginning to really to sell enough that you would make a living. It was always, of course, the idea to make a commercial gallery, but I mean, also the world was different at the time. I mean, there were less collectors. The art world was much smaller than it is nowadays, and as I say, it was also worlds before digital time, before computers. I mean, you cannot imagine. I mean, how, let's say, for instance, before in the 90s, when, let's say, a collector from San Francisco got interested in one of my artists, he would maybe write us a letter, and this would take a couple of days, maybe a week, until we got the letter. And then he said he was inquiring some images of these artists, and then we at the time, you still work with slides. You had to make a photograph of the work, and then you had to bring it, and then you had to make the slide, and then you had to label the slide, and which was another week, and then it was another week to send it. And so then it took maybe a month until we would hear back, whereas nowadays you hear back in an hour. So this is really crazy how it changed very, very much the time. Yes.
And how would like a collector from San Francisco know about your gallery in Zurich?
I mean, this was, of course, this was not the first moment, but after 2 years, I mean, we also slowly started to do art fairs and were also active in magazines, in art magazines like Art Forum or Flash Art or you name them. So like this.
You organized the first gallery show for the Northern Irish artist Willie Doherty, known for color photography and video installations as well in 1992 already. How did you choose him?
This was very interesting. I saw, of course, I was already visiting a lot of shows before in Zurich or mostly in Paris or maybe Cologne. This was maybe the two places where you went in the 90s, to Cologne and to Paris. And I saw his work there at the Gallery in Paris, at the Giovanna Minelli Gallery at the time. But another very great experience for me was also the first European art capital was Glasgow. And I think this was 91. And this was the first one, and I traveled up there, and it had a great impact. This biennial, if you want. At the time, there were also much less biennials. And this Willie Doherty had a big presentation there, a big show there, and that's how we met, and that's how we then started out to present his works in Zurich. Yes.
And how did the public perceive, this new kind of media, like video installations, photography at the time then?
I must also say that at the very, very beginning, if I was positioning myself more towards photography and video work, but not saying that I was much more interested than into other techniques of art. I just thought it was not correct how the art world was ignoring at the time, was still ignoring photography and video as an equal artwork than what it is nowadays. That was also the time you should not forget, when in Düsseldorf there were kind of the Beckers, the very important photographers, and they had all the pupils like Gursky and Struth and Höfer and Ruf. All these artists came out working as artists in photography. So I started also out to concentrate on these new techniques, but then relatively fast gave it up because I understood I was not really interested in the technique. I was more interested in an artist giving his position and saying something. So I opened up. Also at the beginning, as you say, then it's also interesting that the audience at the beginning was quite different, because when you were titled as a photo gallery, so then people came who were interested in photography, and then they were rather disappointed when they came because they didn't see traditional photography, so they didn't really know how to handle it. And also I didn't really know how to handle it because on my side I was not interested in what kind of camera it was and what focus it was and all of that. And these was all the questions what I received by visitors. So whereas you would never have it in the art world to ask what canvas does he use in order to have this paint. So and then I opened up relative fast, and then in 94 I had the first exhibition with Rita Ackermann of a painting show.
But you still represent Willie Doherty,
correct,
right? So because video installations, for instance, are harder to sell than paintings. But you kind of stick to it. It's important to you to have this different media still.
Of course, I stick also to it. I think it's a very important way for artists to give their ideas, like video and photography. But I must say, yes, there is very big changes. In the 90s it was new, and then towards the end of the 90s it started to be accepted as a equal art technique, like painting or sculpture or performance. And then performance was not yet then. And you could also, if you recall, maybe some Art Basel visits end of the 90s or beginning of the 0 years. Almost every gallery had some photography, even galleries who didn't know what it is, but it was so fashionable that everybody wanted to have somebody in photography. So this showed to me also that now it was really, it arrived in the art world, and I was actually very happy about that. And then this was also good for me. And by now, of course, we had, I'm talking about almost 30 years ago. So this changed a lot. And we, of course, opened up our program in many different fields, and mostly also in painting, of course, and mostly also international.
What about video installations? It's still harder to sell than paintings.
Video installations obviously is harder to sell. I mean, I want to say it's not really something for private collectors. It is more for museums and for institutional collectors, because you usually need a space or you need to have a dark room. So it was never ever really meant for private collectors. And we at the time we worked closely. We started early also to work with the Kunsthaus in Zurich, or with Louis Vuitton in Paris, or with foundations in the States, with university museums in the States, collecting a lot of video works. There were some fantastic collectors like the Museum Goetz Foundation in Munich, for instance. Jeannie, she collected a lot of video work from the very, very beginning on, and there was and also very good was Perucchi. This was she was the head of the video department in the Kunsthaus at the time, and she started out to collect also the earliest Pipilotti wrist, for instance, and videos, and a lot of videos as well. So which was really very new at the time. But I think even today it is still very important, of course, but it moved on, it moved on. There is a lot of different ways also for artists to show their ideas.
Now, your gallery operates within the primary market, so working closely with artists. A few galleries have moved into the secondary market as well, where maybe it's also easier to make money, I don't know, make a profit without having to establish a career of an artist that much. Why did you decide to stick to the primary market?
Well, I mean, so far we are a gallery working with artists. I mean, most of them are alive. Alive, which is a contemporary artist, which means that works are still going to be produced. It's not like it's different than to work with an estate or to work with an artist who's passed away, whereas the work is limited. This is a big difference. So I am really interested also, not just in the selling. I mean, I'm also interested in everything what it implies, in being in touch with artists, in sharing their ideas, in suffering with them, and then also being in touch with curators and sharing with them the new work what was produced by artists, and also with collectors. And this is I think it's more it's more open for what you can do than if you do secondary market. But of course we also do secondary market. I mean, if we get a nice work, and if I have a client, of course we also do secondary market. But this is not our main, and that's also the point. If you want to do it as a main, it's also a lot of work. It is not an easy job as it seems. There's a lot of artist dealers around, and it's not easy. So
it's a Shark Tank.
Yes, no, exactly, and and it's very tough, and we never really had this capacity. I would have had at least to have 2 people in a gallery working on that, and as you say, my priority is really the primary market.
So I mentioned you have international artists. How do you choose them? What is there like ideology or a philosophy behind it?
Well, this is not an easy question, but I think, there is 2 important points. One point is that you must love the work, like the work, and understand the work. If you don't do that, then you cannot really promote it. And then the second is also that you want to get along with the artist. I mean, this is a crucial moment. If it doesn't work with an artist, or if an artist is just not interested in working, or too busy, or whatever, there's many reasons, then collaboration is not going to happen. So then this is, I think, the most crucial points. But then there is definitely also other points you have to look into it, commercially. You have to see how is an artist already introduced. Is it, if you start to work with a young artist, like we started to work last year with Volontarie, who's just finished the ZHDK in Zurich 2 years ago. This we know this takes at least 10 years of really working on making him known for collectors and institutions. So then, for instance, if we bring artists internationally, we rather want to have artists that are already ready for an international market, which means it's mostly not the youngest artists, it's rather mid-career artists.
So internationally, but you also support, as you just said, very, very young talents.
Exactly, I think it's interesting to have to reach out on different levels. So we are also promoting quite some Swiss artists. I think this is also somehow makes sense, since I'm also now mostly in Switzerland, and now we are working in Paris more with French artists. This makes perfectly sense, but I think it's also a little bit. I think it's also important for us Swiss galleries to do this job for Swiss artists. I think it's very important to be promoted by a gallery, and even if in galleries, I mean, we do some 10 art fairs in the world. And so then we always try also to promote the Swiss artists, and this is definitely also one of our, I think a little bit, it's also important.
It's quite an investment if you say it takes about 10 years to establish such a young talent.
It is an investment, exactly. It is an investment. So then this needs to be considered, if you select an artist. Also, what you need to consider also is finally the output. I mean, how does an artist work? How many galleries does he have? Is he ready to deliver enough works? This is also something. And then the other thing is also which is very helpful always, to build up kind of a relationship with other galleries worldwide. And let's say with some galleries in New York, maybe in London, Paris, and then to the idea to work together with other galleries for the sake of the artist.
So basically, many galleries representing the same artist in different areas of the world.
Correct.
And you said that it's also a personal relationship that needs to be there. So you already had the case of seeing artists that you really liked, but then ended up not working with because somehow personally, on a personal level, it didn't match.
Yes, this happened. Yes.
Yeah. So your website also says Galerie Peter Kilchmann continues to offer a platform to challenge traditional perspectives. What do you think is the most important role of a gallery today?
Well, and the most important role of a gallery today is to promote art, to promote artists, and by promoting, I mean to enable an artist to produce and to live. This means to open doors to collectors, to institutions, to help them produce catalogs, to organize institutional shows. I think this is our issue, how I see it.
Let's talk a bit about Paris, because besides the two spaces in Zurich, you have one in Paris, which you opened in 2022. So actually in the year that you celebrated 30 years of existence with your gallery. So why Paris? I know you studied there, but why else Paris?
Well, I mean, Paris was always since I also lived there. It was also always a special city for me. Of course, I mean, a city I could go and I knew my whereabouts, if you want. Besides of London, it is also a great city, of course. What is very, very interesting is it really has to deal with COVID a little bit. I mean, the COVID, I had time. I had really a lot. I was in the mountains. I had time to reflect and to think and how to go on and how to move on. And at the time, I really also made my decision that I would really like to have another gallery, mostly probably in the European community, since I think it's good also to play around with having a gallery in Switzerland and having in and out. So I think this is it's actually good. And then the only interesting thing and this would never have happened without COVID. Then it was the moment when there were almost no planes, so you couldn't really fly, you couldn't go around. And then I said I would like to have this gallery, whereas I can go by train. Mm-hmm. Or whereas it's feasible by train.
Yes, yeah.
And finally. There is not so many places from Zurich where it's feasible for me, at least. I mean, this is always personal. Yeah. It's ended up with the two M like Munich and Milano and Paris. Uh-huh. And then I opted for Paris. Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But what kind of potential do you see there as well in the Parisian art scene?
I mean that Paris made the last couple of years a tremendous change. It was still 10 years ago. It was rather for contemporary art, not the center, definitely not the center. I mean, it was definitely much more going on in London or in New York. And this definitely changed with different issues, several issues. I mean, one issue is probably also the Brexit, where I would say this is a puzzle. This is not. Whereas there's a lot of some galleries based in London, because being in the European community, they had to move. So they opted, many of them opted to go to Paris. So Paris has really a great survival. It's also, and it's became very attractive for contemporary modern art, and it's great. I mean, you see also that now Basel is now also in Paris. I mean, this is also one thing, and so it's very exciting. I mean, the great thing about being in Paris is really to have it. I see it, this gallery is almost kind of like a window, like a spot. So each artist, all artists want to show in Paris. This is really also nice. It's also important if you stay as a gallery excited for artists. This is also important, like for collectors as well. And then the other thing is also that there is some galleries around who are not so very sure about how to go on. So
In Paris?
yes, but for me it was at the beginning. Then also the other thing was also that Paris is also a city where everybody goes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, this is also so interesting when I travel around worldwide, and when I, for instance, say in New York, or wherever, if you happen to be in Zurich, please come by the gallery. Then very often people say, yes, we love the city, but we have no plans currently to come to Zurich. And if you say when you happen to be in Paris, almost everybody in the art world has kind of visits at least once a year this city of Paris. So I think it really has also a lot of visitors, a lot of tourists, a lot of art tourists, and this is definitely also great for us.
And you also mentioned before that Art Basel is now present in Paris as well. Did you feel a boost since Art Basel is in the city?
I mean, the booth is definitely that it had a great booth on people visiting. It's now really also so that really, I mean, all the very important or collectors or just collectors worldwide, this is now a must to go to Paris. It's also because of private museums opening up, Louis Vuitton, Pinot collection. They have great spaces now, and the Fondation Cartier, they have now the new output, the new museum right next to the Louvre. I mean, this is also very important for attractiveness. And then at the end, I mean, not least, it's also, I mean, it's a very nice city to be there. It has very nice hotels. I mean, you can get around. I mean, everybody loves to go to Paris.
And so now that was your expansion internationally, basically, with Paris. Are there any other plans of opening other international outposts, or is it also quite a lot of effort to do that?
I mean, currently I have no other ideas to open up in another region or in another country. I mean, I'm not really interested in expanding too much. But it's
Why not?
But why not? But I think it's also always important to make it interesting, to keep it interesting. For instance, if you are asking me that, I mean, it's not true that, because I mean, since we are more active now in Korea, in Seoul, I was even I'm kind of thinking of opening up a pop-up gallery there. And I was actually only recently in Seoul, and I was researching on that. But for the moment being, I decided that we would need to work a bit more in Seoul before opening up a pop-up.
But a pop-up would be something like in between, like trying something out without having a fixed location.
Exactly, that's a pop-up. I mean, I think a pop-up, it's a very good way to try it out.
Sure. Because I'm sure there are also disadvantages of having outpost internationally. You also have to travel there. You need more people and all of that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But it's interesting because in the beginning you mentioned when you started your career in Zurich, Ivan Wirth, for instance, also started your career, who in the meantime has several galleries around the world, mega gallery, which really expanded with hotels and restaurants and everything. So it's a totally different path, but it's not something that interested you.
I think it is always important. I mean, this is, I think also at the end of the day, a gallery cannot, at least for my vision, not be too big, because it is still it's a personal way to deal with. I mean, I like to be still in touch with the artists. I like to be in touch with many collectors. I like also to be in touch. I like to open up doors, and I don't see the gallery. I mean, if you really get too big, then you cannot handle this, and then so this is still something very personal. I think this is also interesting about having a gallery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you feel because you first wanted to become an artist, do you feel like being close to the artist can kind of in German you probably say das is een beetje stauben, es is een beetje abstauben. Somehow you feel
to stay contemporary. Or...
No, because you wanted to be an artist and working very closely with artists. You're more within that world of the artist, which you kind of wanted to go in the first place.
I mean, I like to be in the world of the artists. I like to understand, when they are working on projects, and but I mean, there is different fields, as I say. I mean, I also like to share ideas with collectors, about collecting, about what is always very interesting to me is really talking sometimes with collectors, and then to understand that they live in completely different worlds very often. They are maybe very successful businessmen or bankers, but for instance, as an example of a banker, that you are really you see have figures all day long, and for them it is also art is something relaxing. It is something beyond of the everyday. It is just positive and great, and I mean, this is also to understand, that that's important. I think for art is to me is really something which is as I said, beyond everything. I mean, it has no direct usefulness, but it's about thinking, also about reflecting. That's very important, and then nevertheless also the visual part. I mean, it's very beautiful to have a nice painting at home, and my experience is also usually people rather start to love more and more the works what they have at home, and they don't want to miss them anymore, and then they would like to have a different one, another one. But it's really also this growing and this understanding, and I think artists can also help to somehow try to look in a different way to our times.
Mm-hmm. 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 Different perspectives.
Yes.
And you yourself, through your work, you also get to know different worlds beyond the art world through your collectors. And
correct.
In 1995, you actually founded the art fair Liste Basel together with Eva Pressenhuber and Peter Bleuer, dedicated to emerging galleries and artists. How did that, I mean, Liste in the meantime is so big and everything. So how did that idea come about at the time?
Well, I mean, again, this was also not really so much a plan of we wanted to be the first ones to open up off fair, which now there is now so common nowadays. I mean, basically it worked like this, that, at the 90s, I was already when I had the second year of gallery, I was already, had already a booth at Art Basel. So at the time it was not such a run like the past 20 years. And I was already there, but at the time, I mean, for us young galleries, the Basel Art Fair was completely old-fashioned. It was very old-fashioned. It had to be changed. It had to, I mean, just as some examples, we could only have very big spaces, so 60 square meters, which was too expensive for young galleries. There was no departments for young galleries. even the committee at the time, I think the youngest in the committee was maybe 65, so they had no relation to contemporary art. And I mean, our idea was also we wanted to do something for contemporary art. And I remember that we then had a meeting with the director at the time, with Lorenzo, and told him about that we would like to have some changes, since we see each other we see us for the future. I mean, and somehow it was not the right moment yet at the time. And then I was, yes, with Eva Bresenhuber, since she was in Zurich, and we were talking and talking, and then we decided, yes, so then let's do our own thing. Why not doing our own thing? And then we knew that we had to find someone who would really do the practical work and to organize it. And then we were lucky enough to find Peter Bleuer, and we were very happy to work with him. And he was doing a Liste for many, many, many years. And so that's how it started out. And it was very easy for us. I mean, for Eva and myself, we called up some colleague friends from galleries from London, New York, Paris, and Berlin, and then we had within 2 days we had the list of the galleries already together, and then it started out.
That's amazing. And how were the reactions at the time? Also, maybe from Art Basel. I mean,
the reactions at the very moment were really. I mean, the first year was really crazy. I mean, they really saw us as kind of enemies and of competitors. So I just remembered, for instance, that we were at this brewhouse Wartek, and in order to find a way, even the city of Basel, they put up some signs, going to Liste. And for instance, one thing was that one evening, Art Basel at night, dark at night, they went and took off all these signs.
No way.
So that people would not find us. Or we had also some people from Liste, giving out leaflets, and then they were doing it at Messeplatz, and then police came and took them in because they said that we have to arrest you because you are staying on the property of the Messe and you are not allowed to do that. So this was the very beginning, but then I think only 2 or 3 years after, there was a completely change, and they understood that we are not competing, but we are rather doing something which is important for the big fair as well.
I mean, they did not want to change. You
Yes.
came with suggestions, so you did something else.
Correct.
And yeah, it's interesting. They were afraid of you, even though you were a smaller gallery.
And then very fast there were also changes in the fair. I mean, then they changed the committee. They took up also young dealers in the committee, and then they started to have smaller booths for also smaller galleries and project spaces. So this is then the beginning of these changes.
So do you think that your idea with the Liste actually, in the end, pushed Art Basel to change?
Definitely.
Yeah. And how did the initial concept of the Liste changed over time?
Well, I mean, I was doing it for 5 years, so I was relatively close for doing these 5 years, and since the stands, what we could offer to the galleries, or what Liste offered, were relatively small, so we were always promoting to have one-person shows, or 2-person shows, but not too many. And even knowing that this is a big risk for a young gallery, because I mean, either you are very successful and sell everything, or you are unsuccessful and don't sell a single piece. But it was strong for the presentation, and then this was, I think, actually the guidelines at the beginning, but this then of course was also opened up. And then I think the success was, and the rules were for many, many years the same or similar.
And do you still visit the fair yourself?
Of course, I still visit the fair. Liste, yes, I still visit Liste. I mean, it is still interesting to discover what young gallery worldwide they would promote.
Then you're very active with, and then there's a recent project called Backstage Engelberg. A first event took place in the summer of 2024, so last year, June to August. Now, the Swiss mountains seem to be the perfect place also to show art. There are many galleries and art events in the Engadin, around St. Moritz, Zurich, or Gstaad. Now, you chose Engelberg. You're from Lucerne, so I guess Was that the reason, because you're from that area? Because it's a totally different place to, let's say, Engadin. Why Engelberg, and how?
Correct. I mean, through family reason. I mean, we always had a house up there, so then I was much more connected for all the ski holidays and so on, much more connected to Engelberg than to any other places. And this was actually also again during COVID when I spent time up there. And I really had the idea I would also like to do something here. I would like, why everything has to happen in the Engadin or in Gstaad or in Verbier. So we could also do something in Engelberg. And actually, Engelberg is a good distance. It's not really very far from the main cities in Switzerland. And it was. I'm very happy that it worked out.
It's very central, and it's in summer. I mean, often there are also many events that happen in winter. So you actually really thought about a different place and a different time.
Exactly. I mean, the time was. I mean, it was yes summer, of course, because also the idea was also to offer a great venue for art lovers, but also to offer a new view of the place for people who are not so familiar yet with art. So the decision was to have this exhibition happen in finally 20 different locations in Engelberg, of many locations like the old bowling bar, for instance, Kegelbahn, whereas people are also curious to see it, or the old ice cellar, whereas until beginning of the 20th century, still when there was no refrigerators. I mean, all the big hotels had in this very big cave ice from the winter. They stored it there in the winter. It was full of ice, and this would last the whole summer for them to have ice. And this obviously is not in use anymore since many years, but it's still an impressive cave. So we were also showing there, and we were showing in many different places.
Yeah, 53 artists, I think, from 17 nations, and the show was co-organized and curated by the independent curator Dorothea Strauss.
Correct.
So what idea did she bring to that show?
I mean, she was invited to basically to direct it. I mean, I was initiating it, and didn't have the time to do the everyday job. So she was managing it, and then she had also a green card of selecting the artists, whereas of course we also discussed some common artists.
And what are the plans now with the Backstage Engelberg? Is there going to be a second edition, or?
I mean, this is not decided yet. I mean, there's definitely going to happen something in the future, of course, but we don't know yet exactly how it's going to be. But it was really great, and we saw there's a great possibility to move on.
So there was enough interest?
Yes, of course. I mean, there were a lot of people coming. I mean, we also see that a lot of people from the art world were visiting Engelberg. Some people even for the first time. So journalists were coming and curators were coming. So it was a good success. Also, you have to see, it was also first time. It always takes sometimes. Everything takes a couple of years.
Exactly. So, but now you don't have the energy or the time to do it straight away.
Exactly. This was not the idea, but I mean, this is, since it was the reactions were very positive. I mean, this is going to be considered correct.
And what other plans do you have for the future? I mean, for the 30 years, you did a book, a very nice one. Like, what is happening that you can tell us maybe this year?
Well, I mean, we are now always, I mean, since having 3 galleries, I mean, one at Remystrasse and one in the Margareal in Zurich West, and then another one in Paris. It means it's also a lot of organization. It's also a lot of organization of exhibitions. So this is now definitely an important moment to do that, and then to take care of the art fairs. And as I said, I mean, the latest thing is what I'm looking on now around, but I have to see when I'm going to do it, to do something in Seoul. This is my next.
Oh, we're
Right.
very curious to see that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Remy Strasse, you mentioned that where you opened the gallery, also not very long time ago, it now became this new
Yes.
hotspot
Yeah.
for art. So many galleries are now present there. So you feel that it kind of shifted as well within the city.
It's really very interesting. I mean, I'm very happy to have this gallery in Tremistrasse. It's because it's also the complete opposite of the other gallery I have. The other gallery is more kind of the white cube. It's big spaces to show also big works. And the one in Remistrasse is more a townhouse. It's on 2 floors. The rooms have kind of apartment sizes. So artists love to show in both places. It's completely different. You have rather smaller work. It's more intimate, and there it is rather bigger. I think this is opened up just more possibilities for artists to show their artworks in a good way. The other thing is also, I think, very interesting for me, since the gallery was always in Zurich West, so I never had this experience of being in the center. But this was also a very interesting move, since, I mean, I don't think that Zurich is really a big city, but it is still very diverse. And what is interesting that I realized that for a lot of people living alongside the lake, maybe up to Goldküste, for them it's really until Bellevue, that's really kind of their field, and
Yeah.
that's where they feel home. And so we have visits by some people and collectors much more frequently in Remistrasse than in the other gallery. Even so, it's not really very far, but it can take 20 minutes by car to go over to Mark, and this is always a difference. And this is also a very nice exploration to see that it's different. Yes,
So you try to also get a bit closer to some of the collectors.
correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're very curious then to see and hear more about what you're planning in Seoul, if pop-up is happening soon or not, and all the art fairs that you're going to be taking part this year. Which is the next one?
Next one, I mean, we just did Art Geneva. This was last week, and the next one is for us is going to be ARCO, is in Madrid. It's very beginning of March, and it's also a unique art fair, since it's kind of unificating or bringing together the Spanish world, and we are very much looking forward for that.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter Kilchmann. Very interesting. And of course, if you're interested as well, then check out Peter Kilchmann online, on the website, on Instagram, or of course, check out the gallery if you're in Zurich or in Paris. And make sure to follow Swiss Art Biz on Instagram as well. And you find the podcast on all the podcast platforms, be it iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. And of course, you can watch this video on YouTube. Now, this podcast was produced at Tablecast Studio by Christoph Solonowski and was co-produced by Marcel Marton. Thank you very much for listening, and bye-bye.